Good evening. Thank you all for coming and talk today is 6 apps, 1 code. Yes, you can see a date in the future. Yes, this is because this talk is actually going to be given next week. So I'm actually giving you a talk from the future. That doesn't happen a lot of times. So yes, I invented time traveling. So let's get the boring stuff out of the way. My name is Sani Yusuf. I am a founder of Hybrid. Hybrid is a small consultancy based in London. I'm a trainer and educator on all things Ionic, Angular, and just web technologies. And recently just launched my course on lynda.com. If you got an account, you can check that out. I love open source communities. I would hardly travel to a city where I don't try to reach out to the open source community. And thanks to Kirill for that as well. And UI.School is something I launched, which I will talk about at the end. And if you've seen the Avatar movie, like the blue people, not like that fake other thing, the blue people, that is like my best thing. Like I'm learning the language, like I'm a big sucker. So if you haven't seen that, we're not gonna get along. So today I'm gonna talk about 6 apps, 1 code. And I can already see the looks that people are giving me when I say that, because it's like almost sounds like a contradiction or like an oxymoron. Like, how do you actually do that? The web is kind of everywhere, right? We're at a place where it's a great time to be alive as a web developer because we've seen all these great things. Like a lot of the things we're getting today have been promised to us since like 2007. Like I remember when Steve Jobs decided just to take out Flash from like all Apple products, thinking like browser vendors were just gonna implement stuff the next day. Like it's 17. I'm not in the past. It's 2017 and like some browsers still struggle with like just, you know, like camera support or like geolocation is still a struggle. But today we have the web in every one of these. Like we have the web in mobile, you know. We have the web powering traditional web applications. When I say traditional web applications, I'm talking about you go to your computer and actually open up a huge screen. Standard desktop applications as well, like the actual applications you use on your computer, be it a Mac, Linux, or Windows machine. And guys, I do have a problem with like saying desktop. It's a Nigerian thing. I say desktop sometimes, and I'm too old to actually revert. So if you hear me say desktop, I mean desktop. And Internet of Things is another thing. IoT is everywhere. Has anyone heard of Yuri Shaked? Online. Yuri is like the god of IoT. Yuri uses Angular on IoT to do everything. Like you can check him up. Even on the server side, the web is powering the server side with Node.js. And now Angular Universal, right? So TV applications, a lot of the TV apps you use are powered by the web. Proprietary devices, anybody on an Xbox console? Exactly, some of these apps as well. And I was just speaking to someone last week that was building an airline entertainment stuff with the web. Exactly, so you have a lot of these people basically building everything with the web. And so much of a lot of what we use today is built on the web. I guess one thing I can do is a quick game that I kind of did. It's not really a game. It's like the saddest thing ever. But can anybody spot which one of these is a web application? This is interactive, by the way. Slack, definitely a web application, right? Which other one? Untapped. OK, great. That's a Visual Studio Code. All of them? Someone says all of them? So we can settle where some people are looking at like, oh, definitely not, definitely not. OK, is there anyone that we can say is definitely not a web application that we can have a consensus on? Visual Studio Code? OK, well, somebody give 10 points to the guy at the back. Every single one of those is built with the web. And that's not to say that some of you are wrong or right, but the reason is like, some of these applications you would never have guessed, like Visual Studio Code. It's a desktop application, right? So the app that you're using to write HTML5 is actually built with HTML5. Every one of those applications, every one, this is Untapped. If you drink a lot of beer, you would know Untapped. And actually, that's built with Ionic. That's Uber Lite. That's a progressive web application that Uber have just launched. That's built with the web. That's ServiceWorker, the largest, biggest circuit training application in the world. I actually worked 8 months with ServiceWorker. And that's actually built completely with Ionic, both iOS, Android, Windows. And this is an app that has 20 million plus users, 1.5 million funded on Shark Tank for just like a tiny percentage. And that's Slack actually running on the desktop. And that's still built with the web as well, and Visual Studio Code. So every single one of them. Now, why is it that some of us, this is new information to some of us? Well, the reason is, like, I guess some of you at that point were probably like, they didn't really believe that. This is the point where I say, OK, I'm actually going to show you how that was achieved, or at least to a great degree, we're going to make an attempt. The thing is, it's all about devices. when you try to download a mobile application or whatever application, you go to the App Store, you don't necessarily care how it was built. Does it do what it claims? Yes. When you go to buy a car, you just want to get a car that you can afford. Most of the times you can't, so you swipe your credit card and get yourself in debt. And what do? You're not gonna ask, oh, who designed the wheel? Like, and no, that's not really, let me test drive it. I like the car. Here, I'll pay you for the rest of my life. Very simple, you know? It's the same thing when you go to get a sandwich. You don't really care about who made your sandwich or who made your burger in the back. Does it taste good? Exactly. If it doesn't taste good, you know who to go to. That's the thing. So it's all about devices. You know, our apps run today on different devices, and like the functionality of our application does not change across devices, right? Whether you're on iOS, Android, Windows, smartwatch, car, using Amazon Echo, the things that you can do might be limited, but the core functionality is the same. It's just a device. And how is that achieved? It's all about two things. It's all about experience that's based on screen like density and accessibility options. Some devices you can touch, some you can click, some you can use lasers and do stuff with. You know, like TV remote controls, you can use lasers because you can't really touch. Some you can use your keyboard to do stuff. But it's all about the experience that moves. And it's like same applications, different experience. And this is Spotify running across. So basically, I could wake up in the morning, I could play Spotify on, let's say, computer or maybe my TV at home, right? Turn it on. And I'm in the shower, I can turn off my Amazon Echo or whatever. I'm walking towards the station, I put my smartwatch, I'm still listening to Spotify, changing music. I get into the train, you know, I turn off my phone, I'm listening to Spotify from my phone. I stop, get into my car. Spotify, the same thing, just carry on. Just before I get to work, or maybe while I'm in a meeting and I don't like what the boss is saying, I use my tablet, things like that. I go to my desk, what do? Open up Spotify. It's the same thing, but different experiences. So this is exactly like, this is a good example of how one application can have different experiences across different devices. I guess what at this point is, so what's the issue? What's wrong with being able to achieve this? This looks trivial. This makes sense. We should be able to just have our app across different devices because we want to reach different types of customers, right? But so what's the issue with that? Well, this guy is the issue. If you want to support an iOS guy, you first have to find someone that's really good at Swift, not people that say they're good at Swift, people that actually are, and then they use Xcode. And you're probably going to pay them an arm and a leg. They wouldn't want to work full-time for you. Because why? There's a lot of iOS jobs, and there's not a lot of engineers, you know? So they'll probably want like half of your company. Or if you're lucky, they give you half. Exactly. And the same thing for the Android guy. You got to find someone that knows one of those Java or Kotlin, you know, pay them a lot of money. The guy in the web, even though we have web developers, a lot of us with like the biggest, like, sort of like bunch of developers, we still cost a lot of money. OS X, now you need to support OS X. That's it. Windows Universal, yes, people still use Windows Universal. Exactly. Tomorrow you have an Xbox. Tomorrow some guy that owns Amazon decides to make something called Alexa. You gotta support that. Another guy creates a new framework and calls it maybe Ubuntu OS or something. You gotta support that. That's a cost that just keeps growing, growing, and growing. And there's a secret here. You see the guys in this team, this team, they absolutely hate this team. Like, if a bus hits a guy from this team, someone can't just come from this team and just replace this, like, try to help them out. They don't like each other. They speak completely different languages. Same with this guy. He doesn't like this guy. That guy doesn't like this guy. This guy can't even run anywhere else apart from like Windows up until like last year, you know? Exactly. And this guy, God help you if you're using Objective-C, like good luck, you know? Exactly. So it's a cost that just keeps growing like per platform. And each team is like, you know, averagely 2, 3, 4. That's just developers, QA engineers, UI designers. You know, just because you can design for iOS doesn't mean you can design for Android. It's completely different mindset. For the web, it's different. And when we say web, we're talking about a lot of things. You know, responsive, progressive web applications, mobile web as well, and so many things. You know, so suddenly this guy gets hired in your company. Everybody knows that new product manager. the guy that comes and asks for spreadsheet for everything. You know, he wants to know what you're doing. You have to log your time. That guy that like, you guys have been doing this thing for like years, but this guy comes in, he gets a pay rise. A couple of your mates probably get like, you know, sometimes redundancies happen. And this guy wants to know everything. You know, he wants to make an impression. He wants to make sure that you know he's the boss. You know, and what does he want to do? He asks you, how can we reuse? Because, you know, we don't have a budget. There's never a budget for developers. There just never is, right? Even when the company's making money, there's never budget. Like, we should have like a developers union where we like go and strike on Wall Street and everything. Like, yes, we want pay. Yeah, maybe not. But yeah, and he asks you to find a way to reuse code across all those applications, and that's your job, you know. So this is you at that point. Because you gotta learn all of that. You know, you gotta keep your job. You still gotta pick up your kid from school. You gotta pay. You know, you gotta send money to your like sister or your auntie. You know, and you still have to stay alive, like for some way. This is just all magical. You gotta do this, else you lose your own job. So the question you start asking yourself: is there a way, a more efficient way, where you can like achieve some sort of cross-sharing, cross-platform ability between all these applications? How can you? Is there a way? That's what you start asking yourself, and people started looking at that. This is what to get there is, you start to think of like this, you know, every modern device runs the web. Every one of those devices has some sort of technology baked into it that you can use to get the web. You can bring up a browser in some type of way. So why don't you just use everything go web with everything? Web technologies are relatively easier. Like I could teach you HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, a good chunk of it in like a month. But in a year, you'd probably still be like writing system out println in Java, like for real. And web developers are widely available and everywhere, right? It's the largest chunk of web developer. So people started thinking about this early on. People really started thinking about this, and actually the idea for Cordova actually came up in a pub, and this is real. This is a true story. The greatest ideas come up in a pub. Maybe I should start drinking. But yeah. And literally, that's what they did look into all platforms, and they saw something called the web view, which is a component that allows you to serve web content on all mobile devices. And they were like, well, OK, we're up to something here. That's what we started asking, why can't we just web everything? So what I did is I created a typical use case. Let's say we're building this billion-dollar company. Someone's going to come pay like $1 billion tomorrow for it. We all sell our shares. We go buy an island somewhere in Hawaii. You know, let's make some money. Ideally, we want to support these guys in mobile. We want to support, create a desktop web application, mobile web application, a progressive web app. On the desktop side, we want to support at least these 3 platforms, right? I mean, except if you still use like Solaris or something like that, which nobody does. So we want to do that. So the first thing we want to do is we want to solve the mobile problem first. And when I say mobile, a lot of people just forget about like phablets and tablets. People actually, you'll have these crazy amount of people, because some guy called, I think his name is Steve Jobs, you know, decided to make a bigger phone. And I was like, hey, this is the iPad. And you are my iSheep, and you will pay me your money to me so that I'll be rich, even though it doesn't do anything just like the phone. And people are like, that's a good idea. When we say mobile, we're not just talking about just your phone. Tablets, phablets, and everything. And this is what we want to achieve. We want to be able to make sure that we code once. We want to be able to make sure that we have that code run across this mobile platforms. We want to be able to access hardware features, because the web doesn't really allow us to access hardware features. I mean, they're working on it, but it's still a work in progress. So this is really key, because the whole point of native is native gives you direct access to hardware devices. And in the web till today, because some guys that create the browsers are fighting over who can do it the best. You know, it's not a competition, guys. Like, just do something. And we want to make sure that when we're accessing that device feature, it's the same way as well. This is what Cordova is, so introducing Cordova. What is Cordova? You would Google what Cordova is, but you would see 1,000,001 answers. Not all of them are right, not all of them are wrong as well. Like, sometimes you see half-baked answers. But what is really Cordova? Cordova used to be originally called PhoneGap, and that's where the idea that started up in the pub, actually, created by a couple of guys called in Nitobe. So their company was called Nitobe. They created PhoneGap, which which allowed you to basically bridge between have a bridge code between the web and the device features. So now that your web code can access the device features. And then they got bought by Adobe, so they decided to call it Cordova, donated to the Apache Foundation. And then PhoneGap still exists, but it's sort of like what Adobe owns. So it's like allows you to run some of the Adobe, premium tools like PhoneGap Build. But underlyingly, it's still powered by Cordova. So I know a lot of questions I get is, what's the difference between PhoneGap and Cordova? PhoneGap, Formula One engine, a Formula One car. Cordova, Formula One engine, if that makes sense. I can own a Formula One engine, but I can still supply to different guys, and everything. So that's what it is. It bridges the gap. It supports all major mobile operating systems, even some like proper operating systems as well. It has a plugin interface, just like the gentleman there said, that allows you to access device features. So anything you can do on native, you can do on Cordova. You just need to create a plugin system, sort of like create some of the Java code for Android, and it's sort of like a bridge between JavaScript and native. So sort of like a publish, subscribe message system. So we've solved our web problem, right? Well, not really. This is one thing that people do not easily forget. The experience between devices is different. There's a reason why Apple and Google don't get along. It's because they don't like each other in the first place. Or Google and Microsoft don't get along. It's kind of like everybody has their own take. And that's what we need. It's not a bad thing. It's just we need to have our own take on sort of different expressing ideas. Because if we have one way to do everything, then there will never be innovation. So in some way, difference is actually good. Because I'm pro people branching out. Because if it becomes a problem, people will come and work together. And we're seeing it today. Look at how, for example, when Chrome came out, a lot of the teams did. But now look at how Apple, Google, Microsoft all working together with the W3C spec, trying to make features work. Because we realized that we didn't really like what Microsoft did with Internet Explorer. I mean, yeah, I know of a site that literally adds $20 to your checkout if you use the Internet Explorer. They were like, just upgrade, we wouldn't charge you, but if you insist on using this browser, you pay for the support. Exactly. And we've seen that even Microsoft just made a new browser and everything, right? And that's good. We are what matters, we the developers. We should be at the forefront. Company politics shouldn't be. And that's great, and that's what all these great companies like Google, Facebook are all doing now. So it's a great time to be alive. But back to the board, it's like this is the same application running across multiple devices. This is Facebook running on Microsoft Windows Phone, on Android, and on iOS. And they all look slightly different. They all operate different because on iOS, you have different icons, different gestures. And you don't realize that because you own an iPhone. But you don't realize that this guy that has Android has a back button. And you don't. And as an Android phone user, when you press the back button, there's something you're expecting to happen. Now, Windows Phone has a search menu. Exactly. Windows Phone uses stateless. It's a stateless type of application, so that when you go and come back to your app, it's very stateless. Very different type of mindsets. Very different. It's just the same how you take it. When you use a Mac, your options are on the left. On the Windows, they're on the right. But we forget that. And that's why when we go on different devices, we're like, why is it here? It's like every device has different skins. They have their own take. And we forget that. And we shouldn't forget about tablets as well. So this has added another complexity to our plan to reuse that we didn't really plan for. So how do you actually now make sure that you're using Cordova, but you're also planning for these differences? Now, when Cordova came out, what a lot of people did is they took their 700 megabyte application and just dumped it with Cordova and built it and complained that it was slow and blamed Cordova. Facebook was one of those companies, decided to just, in 2011, rebuild their apps with Cordova. And I think in 3 weeks, they realized it was a bad idea because everyone was complaining that it's too slow. So they were trying to aggressively push HTML5. Steve Jobs tried, it didn't work. People still use Flash till today. So it's like the web has all these promises, but it hasn't really delivered because it's going to take some time. But then you have this as well to deal with, material design and stuff like that. And this is where Ionic comes in. So Ionic, what is Ionic? 700 different answers. But Ionic is simply just a web SDK for creating mobile applications. That's all it is. That's all it will probably always be. It's open source. It's built with web technologies that you're already used to. It supports Android, iOS, and Windows Universal as first-class citizen. Now, what Ionic gives you is it gives you a set of tools that when they go into a specific platform, they just know. So the Ionic team has gone ahead and already done all the differences for you. When you write your code with Ionic, it just knows that I'm on an iOS device and I should look like this, I should act like this, my gestures are different, everything about me is different. So what are some of the features of Ionic? Let's see. Superb cross-platform components. This is probably the biggest selling feature of Ionic. Not just does it allow you to target multiple devices, but this is the same code running. No if-elses. It's just the same exact thing running. And the code knows that on iOS, this menu here should look like this because that's how it is on iOS native. You know, the icons, the font size, everything. On Android, it's material design. It knows, OK, let's do this. Let's look like this. Let's have a bit more color. Let's use material design, you know? On Windows platform, I don't know what that is called. I think it used to be called the Metro design, actually. Yes, the Metro design. So it takes the Metro design, different icons, different shadows, everything. But you're writing that code once. So you're never really thinking Windows, iOS, Android. You're just thinking, I want to solve my problem. And Ionic is figuring out, OK, it's supposed to look like this. And you can go ahead and override these things. So let's say, you know what, I want to use material design for iOS, Android, and Windows. You can override that. Oh, no, I just want only this particular component. You can override on global level, platform level, and component level as well. You can override anything you want. And they have a powerful icons library called the Ionicons library that literally allows you to sort of like gives you all those mobile icons so that you don't have to like go start importing font icons or something like that. Everything, and that's open source as well. And this CLIs are one of the most underrated things. Command language interface tools are some of the things that we really take for granted. And why? Because we're used to just sort of like having, a few years ago when we were creating a web application, you go, you add jQuery to the source file, you target that document already if you remember, and you know what happens? Every time you make a new change, you refresh. But today, the web is so complex. We have single-page applications. We have Babel, ES6, TypeScript, this, that, Power Rangers, and don't know, everything. You know, the web is this big, crazy thing now. If you're like me and you're lazy that you don't want to create your own build tool, having a CLI makes everything easy. And so with Ionic, because everything is written in TypeScript, handles all the Cordova bits for you, handles things like that you normally do with Yeoman generator to generate like different parts of your application, scaffolding, error reporting as well. It handles error reporting for you. So if you have an error, instead of like reading through an Angular error that is like, because Angular is so cool with errors, you know, it's just like, there's something wrong. I'm not going to tell you where it is. You go figure it out. It's almost like it spits on our face, you know. And there's something called tree shaking. So tree shaking is this concept where, you know, when you shake a tree, like an apple tree, what happens? Apples fall. So a lot of the times, think about like Bootstrap. You import Bootstrap. You're probably going to use the grid and like 5 parts of Bootstrap. But all the other things that you're not using doesn't need to go to your production. So tree shaking is where when you're building, your CLI goes in and removes all the parts of your application that you're not using. So if you have a function called take me to Manhattan, which you're using, and you have another one called take me to, I don't know, Australia, which you're never going to call, that's taking space and memory in your application. So tree shaking is the process where all that code that you're never going to use gets taken out at build time. So you don't have to. That, by making your app really small, that means when you request files for your application, it's going to launch really, really fast. So it kind of makes sense. Other features that I'm not really going to talk about is like right to left support. We forget that there's like 1 billion people that read from right to left in the world. Like, you know, and these people code too. They use apps just like us. They probably even buy more apps than us. But they read from right to left. You know, Arabic, Hebrew, you know, all these other languages. Internationalization. A lot of these apps are not just for one locale. They're for multiple locales. You want to support multiple languages, right? That's pretty cool. And there's another thing called Ionic Pro Cloud Tools. It's like, you can look that up. It's sort of like their suite of tools. So who's using Ionic? Every time I start to talk about something, people always want to know who's building what with it. And there's been 4 million apps generated. 110 countries have like meetup groups. I've been to like at least 4, 5, 6, or maybe up to 10 of those countries across 4 continents. 13,000 members on the Slack community. Like, if you have a question, there's people there asking how to do their final year projects, really. Like, very active on forum. 30,000 stars on GitHub. Yeah, that's a typo. Companies like even Microsoft, Airbus, Diesel, Dow Jones, even Google, you have used tools like Ionic, you know. And apps include Untapped, Swirlkit, Microsoft Flow. So these are like, and the Dow Jones have actually gone people to create applications with Ionic. And the reason why you probably, some of this might be new to you is because, again, when people download applications, they're not really bothering what it was built on. You know, you don't want to know what your sandwich, who built your sandwich. You just want to eat the sandwich. If it's tasty, that's what you care. So, been talking and talking and talking and talking. Now let's actually see some demo. The first thing you're gonna do, and if you're following on with me as well, you can follow on with me. All right, so if you don't have Ionic installed, what you'd probably want to do is like sudo npm install, you know, Ionic -G, right? You'd want to get Ionic and install the CLI local, globally. I'm not going to do that, of course, because I already have. I'll be very irresponsible if I don't have Ionic installed on my computer and I come up here. I already have this installed, but you can go ahead and run that command. So let's just say, you know, we've just waited a little bit. Our command has gone installed. Now we want to start using Ionic. How do we create a new application? So I'll just CD it into my desktop. I'm just going to do Ionic start. And what do we call this application? Anyone? I love this guy. Yes, $1 billion application. Look at that. You give it a name, and there are other parameters you can configure, but these are like the basic ones. And then you can also give it a template. Now, what's the template? A lot of the times when you're building an application, especially I as a consultant, when people want to talk to me, I have this idea. It's like Uber, or it's like Airbnb. We try to make connections, you know. Then you have the guys that are like, oh, I have this great idea. I have a social network, but it's like all of Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat, but all in one, you know, things like that. But we try to use comparisons. So Ionic have gone ahead and said they have like templates for like slide menu-based applications, tab-based application, blank for just starting from scratch, Google Maps-based, or if you find anyone online that has created a starter you want to use, you can just pass the GitHub URL. I'm just going to use blank, so let's keep this original. So I'm just going to say BDA blank, and then we're just going to see, I'm not going to upgrade, not now, nope. And this is just going to go, fetch Ionic, create an application, do an npm install. This is Google, they have really fast internet. This will go through, it will work. It will not fail me, not today. There we go. And that's just going to go do the npm install for me as well. You can actually skip the npm install if you want, but I'm not going to go into what the CLI allows you to do. And so I'm just going to go into cd bda, you know, and I'm just going to run this command called Ionic lab and just hit enter. And that's all I'm going to do. So let's wait for that. And that's just going to start the CLI, configure what needs to be configured. And voila, it's going to actually launch my application for me. This is kind of part of what we want to build today, actually, but it's already cached. This is our app running already. Like in like how many steps, we already have our app. But we don't just have our app running on iOS. We actually have our app running on Android and Windows at the same time. So this is our app running, right? And in that one command, we've actually generated 3 applications. And can anyone see any glaring differences? Anyone? Font, yes, perfect. Font size, font types are different because font types and font faces are different across platforms by default. Anyone else? Perfect. Alignment, look at that. This is centered. If you use an iOS application, this is completely normal to you. If you use Android, that's completely normal to you because Android has headers aligned to the left by default. Same for Windows, exactly. And again, these are behaviors that you haven't actually touched. You get this for free. Like Ionic has already figured it out. Like, okay, this is how it is normally. If you want to change it, you're fine. We let you change it, but this is how it is normally. And this goes beyond, this is what we call platform continuity. This goes beyond just alignment. It goes up until like animations, transitions. If I had a lot of pages here, you'd see the transitions actually act the same way. So many things, like on iOS, you can swipe in from the left to go back. You have that, but you don't have that on Android because it doesn't exist. Things like that. So yeah, we can see that we already have some differences here. And we've already kind of created our what's it called? Our 3 applications. So now let's go ahead and build something, $1 billion application, right? All right. Yes. So I'm just going to finally, the funny thing is we've gotten this far, we haven't actually opened our code. That's actually pretty cool. So let's look for $1 billion application here. Where is this guy? And I'm just going to open this guy up on Visual Studio Code and make sure that the guy is huge. We've done this now, right? Like, let's actually look at our code. Can everybody see? Is that OK? All right. So we have like our standard Ionic application. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go into source. We're going to go into pages. We have our home page. So let's actually change this to our BDA and just save that and then go back to our preview to see that. And as well, the CLI automatically watches, makes sure that things are cool. It just does all of that for you. So what I think we should build is this. I have this server running here, my JSON. Yeah. So I have this server that I'm running. So I like to travel a lot because it's kind of like part of what I do, right? I travel a lot around the world to give talks and conferences and stuff. But one country that I really was excited to go to was Israel. And I've been to Israel like twice, and it's like one of my favorite places in the world. And they have like, the reason why is there's so much to learn. Amidst all you read in the news, if you actually ignore that, there's actually so much, just like everywhere else in the world. If you ignore all the media is telling you, people are just living their lives normally, and there's so much beauty. And they have a lot of sites. So what I did is I gathered all these sites that I would love to visit in my lifetime. And I hosted that as a live API working. So this is not like cache data or anything. We can go to a JSON here. By the way, if you see any like interesting things in my browser history, or it's my personal computer, guys, just say yes. Or any interesting like notifications coming up. So view, we can see that now. We can see like what we have: an ID, a description, an image, and a name. So we can see that, right? So the first thing, what would be nice is if we could have like a sort of like a list of sites that we can see. Wouldn't that be cool, right? OK, let's first, how I normally start is when you want to create a list of something, you want to create a design for what one looks like, right? So let's do that. So let's remove all of that. And Ionic has, you can see all the tags in Ionic. You've never seen this, but you can see how semantic they are. Ion header, Ion content, like it just makes sense from the mobile point of view. You have a header, you have a content point of view, you have a title, things like that. And anything prefixed with Ion is Ionics. So we can just go ahead and say Ion card. Anybody familiar with a card? If you use like Google Now and just a card design. So they already have something like that. And what I would love to do is I would like to have an image somewhere there. And under the image, I would have Ion card content. Card content. And in that image, you know what I'm going to do? I'm actually just going to take this guy here, and I'm going to see what he looks like. And I'm just going to copy everything from here just to make the design, so that design is visually ready. And I'm just going to say name of site. So let's just actually see what this looks like. Let's see if we agree with this design. This looks cool. We can go with this design, so we can have a list of sites. And this is Jerusalem, by the way, guys. Like, it's a great place you have to visit in your life, really. Like, so you can see like a site, and as well. Can anybody see any differences? Maybe slight differences. You can see a shadow here. It's a bit thicker because in material design they have like a bit. So they go down to like these little details that you forget. On iOS, it's a bit less. It's a bit more subtle. On Windows, it's completely different. Like you can see how the size is just completely different. And that's how it is. Like when you're using mobile applications, you forget that. But different people have different experiences. So we want to go with this design, right? So what next? What do you think we should do next to get the full data? Anyone? Service. Yeah, we can create a service, right? Yeah, that would probably be the best pattern way. Well, we have time, so I'm so sorry, sir, but we wouldn't create a service today. We want to save some time. But the whole point of creating a service, we want to query that data, right? And let's go ahead and do that. So to query that data, we would use the Angular HTTP. So we would go to, first thing we want to do is make sure and this is just a standard Angular application still. So we want to make sure we import our HTTP module. And I'm going to be using HTTP client, not HTTP, HTTP, not HTTP client, because I don't want to confuse some people that haven't made the move. So there's a new client called HTTP client, which is better. but I'm just gonna use the older one because everyone knows about that one. So I'm just gonna import that module. So I'm just gonna say at Angular, HTTP, I'm gonna say HTTP module, and I'm just gonna take this guy here and add him to the imports, right? By the way, if I do anything wrong, guys, feel free to correct me. So now we have the HTTP module inside of our application, so we can go ahead and use it. So I'm gonna do the way where you shouldn't really do. You should create a service, but hey, shh, don't tell anyone. So we just go here, import the guy from at Angular, and we're gonna import the Angular HTTP service, HTTP, and we're just gonna make this guy as a property of the class. So we're gonna say private HTTP, HTTP like that. So we've injected that to use dependency injection, and we're probably just gonna create a public property to say public maybe sites, right? Or let's just say sites list, and inside here, what we're gonna do is say, why don't we use an observable, right? So site list, we're just gonna say this dot HTTP dot get, and we can just go back to our API here and try to copy that and put that here. And because we're using HTTP, we need to use the map operator to make sure that we're converting that JSON to, I can't actually remember. Does anyone know what's it called for map? I don't want to look into my code. It's rxjx/operator add/.
It's already been imported by the HTTP module, so you just call it.
Say that again?
It's already been imported by the HTTP module.
Or the map operator?
Yeah.
Oh no, I think.
You're not from the service. Oh yeah.
Yeah. When you create a service, normally you'd, yeah. So import, I think it's rxjs/add/operator, then I think map, right? Come on, Sani, we can do this. Yeah. Yes. That's how you know you've used a lot of observables. And we'll probably want to do this as well. So we want to say .map. Actually, what we should do is this .sites observable. And I use the $, it's just a notation to show that, oh, this is probably an observable, because the HTTP request in Angular returns you an observable. But it returns you, if you use the HTTP service, it returns you an observable of type response, which means you actually don't have access to your data. The HTTP client has done that for you, but I'm not using that because some people are still not familiar with that. That's cool, right? So I'm going to call that map here, the map operator. I'm just going to give this some type in here. Let me do this. So I'm just going to call the map operator. I'm going to say data. Say that again? OK. I'm going to say data.json. So does everybody know what I'm doing on line 19? Exactly. So I'm just unraveling that observable, making sure it's data. So now we have some sort of an observable of our data. Now we want to use the observable to display the list of our sites. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do what we call an ng4 equals site let site of sites list. We're going to pass in the async pipe. Everybody familiar with the async pipe? That's when you're using an observable, you pass the async pipe, and instead of using the normal way, because if we weren't using observables, we'd have to subscribe to that observable, pass the data, which is really, really against some best practices. And we want to bind the source file of our image to, let's actually go back to our data and to see what that looks like. We want to bind it to image property. So we're going to say, we're going to do this guy here and delete this guy. Get away. Why don't you want to go? Yeah, so yes. So finally, we want to do site.image. And over here, we'll probably want to put the name, site.name. And I'm not just getting this from here. I'm just following this, site.image, site.name. So let's go back to our app and actually see that now. So now if we go, we can actually see our application. running on 3 browsers. So you can see like very famous sites in Israel. You can see Jerusalem, Haifa, still not done. Nazareth, still not done. Jaffa, done. Dead Sea, pretty cool. They don't joke with the Dead Sea. You actually can't sink. It is not a drill, trust me. And you can see all these beautiful sites. And now we actually have 3 mobile applications running. And if we wanted to test this, for sure, to say that, hey, these were actually running, I can go ahead and do a terminal here and say Ionic Cordova run iOS. And that would actually fire my iOS emulator and actually build this application and run it. So you would see the app as if it was like gotten from the App Store. That's going to take like a bit of some time, but we'll wait for that. Like we will carry on while that's happening. But still, what I'm trying to say is at this point, we still haven't coded like 3 times. We're coding once still. Ionic sits on top of Cordova. Cordova is just for giving you access to hardware devices and building so that you can publish to the App Store. That's as simple as it is. I think of Ionic as like Bootstrap on top of Cordova. Ionic is the one giving you the UI layer and all those tools to make sure that your app is more concerned about the experience, while Cordova is more concerned on the tooling level. If you needed to use a camera, for example, you'd be using Cordova to go retrieve that, because the code for camera, getting a picture from the camera is different from iOS, Android, and Windows. But Cordova has figured that out. It just gives you one interface, and you're going to get a picture regardless of what device you're on. But Ionic has something called Ionic Native, which is like Angular versions of a lot of the famous Cordova plugins. So half the time, you actually don't need to like go deep down. They've kind of done that for you. Our guy here is almost done. So we'll let him, we'll let him have his time. But we have 3 applications now. So let's go back to our slides. It's safe to say we've solved our mobile problem, right? We did everything we wanted to do. We shared one code. We have 3 apps running, and we're good. And let's just see if that guy is done. So here is the most beautiful phone in the world and the most awesome, this is the definition of brainwash. The fact that people are willing to pay $1,000 for a phone that has that. 2017, human beings. And this is like this is not a screenshot. Like I can actually scroll and do everything. And if I do the thing, like I can actually see that. This is a real application that you can submit to the App Store. And that's pretty cool. We've done that with what? How many commands? Like if I told you at the store, hey, in less than 30 minutes, I get you 3 applications that would work on the App Store, you probably think I was lying. Well, if I told you that and I happen to be Nigerian, you'd definitely not believe me. Exactly. And I told you that, like, I was a prince and I just needed some money and everything. Don't worry, guys, I'm a Nigerian. So let's go back to slides. So we've done that. We've done that bit now. iOS, Android, Windows. Everybody happy? Right? OK. So now we want to solve web. And there's one guy we didn't touch in the mobile side. We didn't touch tablets. We're just going to pretend that we've forgotten like every other mobile developer does, Get your apps on the phone and then just forget about the people using iPads until like 1 million of them send you emails. So let's solve this guy. The thing with desktop is it's all about screen sizes, because you can go to www.verygreatinterestingwebsite.com on so many devices, on a phone, on a tablet, but you still use a browser. And those screen sizes are different. This is a very great implementation of some guy. This is a Big Mac. This is a laptop. This is taking advantage of the screen here. This guy's taking advantage of the tablet and the phone. Because a lot of people don't actually download your application, especially in the developing world. And I come from Nigeria. That's pretty common. Like, people don't have data like that. Data is expensive. Like, people fight over data. Like, they're not going to waste their data downloading your app. We take that for granted. We've got 4G. Like, I was traveling around Nigeria for 8 months, and sometimes I see edge. A lot of times I see edge. That's completely normal. Like, we forget. I call it first world problems. Like, oh, my internet's very slow. And I'm like, oh, you think that's slow? Wait till you travel. And this is it we forget about. Consider click input as well. On a bigger device, some people use like mice and stuff like that. Keyboard, entry as well. And different devices, some people, and don't forget about accessibility. Like devices like this, right? How have you built your web application where it's going to respond to devices like this? It's going to know to do certain things. Let's try to solve the web, right? OK, so we want to adapt the web for screen size. And why do we want to do that? So right now, if we take this guy here and we do this, this is what we see. this is the guy nobody likes, right? And this guy has lost business to so many people because they go on your website and they see that, just, you know, like this rock-looking application because you haven't optimized. Or you go on a mobile phone and everything is so big that you have to like zoom in and everything. You don't like that. We want to do stuff on the go. We want to do it really quick and get out. People don't come to your website to stay, except if it's like Snapchat or, well, Snapchat doesn't have a website, or Twitter or Facebook, where people just go there for a long time. All right, so let's solve this guy. So what we're going to do is, Ionic has a grid system that is very, pretty much a mirror of the, what's it called? The Bootstrap grid. So we can just go ahead and just take advantage of that grid system and say Ion grid. And we can say Ion row. And inside that row, we want to have a column, Ion col. And so this is the part where I probably will just do a little bit of cheating. Don't worry, guys. And just to save us some time. So I'm just going to open this here. Oh, not here, actually. Cancel. So I'm just going to open this in a different thing. I'm just going to steal just a little bit of code, guys, just to save us some time. And I'm gonna take this here. Where is that guy? Where is that guy? Where is that guy? So I'm going to just copy just that bit of code to save us a lot of typing. And I'm going to explain what that guy's doing. So what we've done here is we've decided to use the grid, but we've specified breakpoints. We're saying on an extra large screen, the grid is by default 12 with 12 column base. We're saying on an extra large screen, this particular column should take 3 spaces. One column should take 3 spaces. Because if we go back to our application, this is unusable right now, right? So we're saying extra large screen, take 3 spaces. That means you're going to have 4 columns because 3, 3, 3, 3. 4 times 3, 12. On a large screen, which is like, you know, maybe like a slightly older monitor, you know, that it doesn't have like a huge resolution, take 4 spaces. So we're going to have 3 columns. On a medium screen, like a tablet, take 6. On a small screen, like a mobile phone, take 12. And if you find a screen that for some reason we didn't specify, just stick to the normal one. Exactly, that is no alpha. We don't know about that particular device. And this seems fair, right? This makes a lot of sense. So let's actually see how that would work. So we're just going to take this guy here, copy this guy, put him inside the column code. And we're going to actually take our, what's it called, our ng4, because we don't want to be repeating. Else we just have one column, right? That doesn't make any sense. So we want to put this guy here and make sure that we are repeating across the columns, because that's what we want to repeat. And so we save that, and then we go back to our code, and we have an error. I know this error. This is the one where we have to do this. Let's open our terminal. And this is an error I've actually reported, because it keeps happening and happening, and no one wants to fix it. It's a Webpack error that is happening because it's kind of looking at the grid code. While we were doing that, I was like, oh, I don't know what's happening here. But as soon as we do this bit, it solves itself. Yeah. You guys go. Make sure you vote my pull request, or not my pull request, my issue, because I don't really write pull requests. All right, so now if we go to this guy here, what do we see? This is much better. Like, even if I was Nigerian Prince, you would still give me your money now, like, because I've really done a good job. Like, I've made it all pretty cool. Now, on a huge screen like this, and this is actually pretty good because this is a projector. On a huge screen, we can see that we can have 4. Like, this is pretty for touch, for click. We've talked about that, you know. All right, so let's make this a little bit interesting now. Let's make it smaller. So if we're like on a desktop monitor that's a bit old, now we have 3 on each row, which makes a lot of sense because that screen, if you had 4, like everything would then look actually too small because you would try to shrink it. But now we're taking advantage of the space. So what about if we go something like a tablet? As soon as we shrink down to a tablet, we can actually see 2 columns. So if you're using a tablet, that would feel natural. You can just scroll up and do that. And if we go back to our mobile phone, we have one, or our phablet, we have one. And that makes a lot of sense. That makes it so easy. Remember, guys, we're still writing one code. So now we've solved pretty much that particular problem. So now we're going to go back to the slides. We've solved our problem for this guy, right? Well, not really, actually. Again, why? Because the whole point is, what about progressive web applications? What about that? Right? The whole point is we want to be able to have progressive web apps. So what is a PWA? And this is the question someone asked earlier. So a PWA, simply, right? I'm not going to lie, there are like 10 billion people trying to answer that question, right? This is my own take. It's simply a web application that works offline. That's the whole point. And that happens thanks to, it can be installed on a mobile phone. So imagine going to www.facebook.com today and then being able to install that. Today, when you go to the App Store and you install a mobile application, what happens when a new update comes? You've got to get that new update, right? But when you go on Facebook and they change the design and you're like cursing everybody in Facebook because you don't like the new design, 2 weeks later you learn to live with it, what happens? You just get the new design. Somebody pushes to master, you get the new design. PWAs allow you to, imagine when you install your app, because it's still web, when a new design comes, you just get it. So that way you can install games, you can install so many things on the web. You don't need to go through any app store and give somebody 30% of your money just because they created something called the App Store. And it can run full screen. It can have an icon. It can have a splash screen. And there's something called the manifest.json and ServiceWorker. And I'll talk about that a bit more. This is what the ServiceWorker is. The ServiceWorker is a browser standard. It's just like the camera standard, the Bluetooth standard, IndexedDB standard. It's a standard that browser vendors are building into their browsers. As of today, Chrome has done, I think Mozilla has done, Microsoft are implementing, Apple have finally said, we will implement. So we just need to wait 10 years or 20 years until we're all dead, then finally someone's going to push the button. But Apple have finally decided to say yes, they will support service workers. So what a service worker does, it sits in between your app and the server. It proxies connections. Because everything in your application is a request. Your index, the HTML, is a request to the server, everything. So what happens is when you try to get a picture, you go to this very incredible, interesting website, and you're looking at very interesting pictures, or videos. I don't judge you. And you request that data. Every time you request that data, it goes to the server. But if the URL is the same, the image is never going to change, right? The image is never going to change magically. So if you go get that data, with the service worker, you can cache that request. And the next time somebody tries to get that data, now instead of going like this, it just goes, hey, do you have a copy? Yes, go back. What do you think that means? Very, very quickly, you can get data. And you have unlimited storage with the service worker. And another thing is that the service worker runs independent of your app. It's a system-level operation. So even when your application is closed, the service worker associated to it can still be alive. That's pretty cool because now push notifications, you can literally send data, push data to your app. Because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do, I check Instagram. I want to see them likes. I want to see them likes. I check Twitter. I want to see what the guy that talks about Kofefe is saying now, Exactly, because he's pretty cool. I think he makes me laugh on Twitter, so why not? That could be any data. Any type of network request, exactly. And that's because today we've sent guys to the moon. There's a guy that wants to travel around the world in an hour, but when you go offline, the best thing you see is a dinosaur. That's the best thing you see. You can play a dinosaur game when you go offline. In 2017, 40, 50 years after we sent guys to the moon, that's the best thing we see, literally. You can access, not local storage, you can access IndexedDB, but it has another caching mechanism that literally gives you can still access IndexedDB, but you can think of, if you think of it as local storage, yes, but it's way better than that. It's the cache system of Service Worker allows you unlimited storage. Local storage only gives you 5 MB. And you can now they're even implementing standards where when your computer is running out of memory, your computer can kind of just delete what it wants, but you can actually lock and say this particular, imagine if it's a bank application, you don't want your computer fiddling around with that kind of data. Say, no, computer, just tell the user that you don't have enough memory. So the user has to do that himself, but the computer now can't. They're implementing things like that as well now. This is what the service worker is doing all of that for you. You can cache requests and stuff like that. So now that means when you How cool would it be if you went on Twitter and then you closed it and you launched Twitter again when there was no network? Instead of seeing the dinosaur or seeing nothing or 404, you could actually see your old tweets. That makes sense. If you went, things like that. And that's what we want. We don't want a web where we see a dinosaur. Like, there's a reason why it's called a dinosaur. They died off millions of years ago. You don't want to go back to there. So that, and it solves the flaky connection. Does anybody know what Li-Fi means? Li-Fi is when you have like 2 bars on your phone and your phone is like telling you, oh, I'm looking for service. No, your phone doesn't know what it's doing. There's no service. It's making you believe there is. And when you have flaky connection, especially emerging markets, you know, Africa, Asia, Southern Asia, you need to manage a network request a lot. You can throttle that. ServiceWorker can help you with that. Because if a request is taking too long, you can just serve the old content. Let's solve the ServiceWorker problem. OK, now we're going to go back to the code. Luckily for us, whenever we create an Ionic application, where is our code? We can close this guy. Whenever we create an Ionic application, what happens is they actually add a free ServiceWorker for us. Like, you don't have to pay anything. Like, there's already a ServiceWorker using ServiceWorker Toolbox that is like a sort of like a library on top of ServiceWorker, because working with APIs are notoriously hard. That's why we have a library for everything. And they already do some pre-caching for you. You can pre-cache. And all we need to do actually is just go to index.html, and we can just say we actually want to use a ServiceWorker. We can uncomment this line here and uncomment this guy here. And what we're doing here is we're saying if ServiceWorker is in Navigator, that means it exists in this browser as a feature. So if you go on Safari, this would fail, of course. But in Chrome, this would go. Then you can register the ServiceWorker. ServiceWorker has a life cycle. It has different stages in the life cycle. Started, you can check that up online. But if the browser doesn't support ServiceWorker, then just carry on like every other dinosaur application. Just continue. So if we just save that, and we actually just wait for our app to launch again, so we can refresh and refresh and refresh and do whatever we want to do. But here's what we're going to do now. I'm actually going to go ahead and go offline. And then I'm trying to go and go to and then play this guy like. If you can beat my high score, by the way, I'm pretty good. Oh, I'm actually crap. So let's try and actually relaunch our application here. But if we relaunch our application, we can actually still see stuff. We can actually relaunch the application. Now, this is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm serving that application, but that application is actually making a network request. So it's not making a request to Webpack. Webpack is just to serve the application to mimic a server locally. So if I actually push this application to like a server, a real server, you will still see the same thing. When I actually started, I actually built this yesterday, and we actually saw a cache version. And what I did was to clear that. So you can actually, I can clear the cache and do this all over again. So what you see is an application. You see something called ServiceWorker. And you can see that the ServiceWorker was registered. And you can actually see the ServiceWorker cache. What's it called? And so you can also see the manifest.json. It tells you all the stuff you need to do. And you can see the cache storage here. Yes, this is, yes. So this is the cache for the ServiceWorker that's created. It said it's going to cache every single request that it reached, because we registered that ServiceWorker while the app was still running normally. So when those requests were made, the ServiceWorker by default was, my ServiceWorker is already triggered to just cache everything. And you can choose and pick. You can say, OK, only cache specific images. Oh, no, don't cache this, and go and get me the fresh one first. And then if you can't get the fresh one from the server, or maybe you do a race condition, whoever comes back first, you get it. But of course, the cache will always come back first because it's not hitting the server, things like that. So you can really do so many cool stuff with the cache. But this is how you can see. So you can come here. And a lot of the sites you're using today actually have service workers. A lot of them, and you don't realize that. But we're kind of still offline. We can still play our game. But we can refresh our app as many times as possible, and we will still get those, what's it called? And if we actually look at the network tab here, let's see if we actually can actually, oh no, it will be on the console tag. Yes, you can see that a lot of those requests are failing to the server, but they're not failing locally because we have them locally. Now, the opportunities for these are endless. Think about games. You know, Flappy Bird. You remember when Flappy Bird came out and the guy was like, oh, $50,000 a day is too much for me. I need to take the game out. My life has changed. And people started selling their phones that had Flappy Bird for so much. Yeah, if you open any, what's it called, as long as you're serving the same domain in another browser that supports ServiceWorker, you can. So unfortunately, I only have Chrome because Safari doesn't support ServiceWorker. So if you open like another browser, as long as that domain is still there and the cache is local, it's just gonna, it's domain specific. Because remember, the ServiceWorker is a system level, what's it called, feature. So even if you went to Safari and you install the ServiceWorker, it's not gonna install a different one for Chrome or for, it's a system level stuff. It's gonna say for this domain, this ServiceWorker is there. Oh, private. Would private, isn't private by default? It's not gonna work because that's the whole point of private, isn't it? Not to start, exactly. Set that you shouldn't get any resources. That's why private is used for porn, right? Well, I guess. But the Webpack question is like, yes, we're using Ionic for Webpack, but those resources are not coming from Webpack. If you look at our code here, we're actually making like an actual HTTP call. OK, let's do that. So probably those requests we didn't even send. I think, no, that's not how my service worker is configured. But yeah, I think let's check that. Let's inspect this element, and let's go to network, and let's refresh. Oh, yeah. Oh, of course, I see what you mean now. So yeah, the GET request will fail, and then my service worker will handle, sorry, my bad, will handle. So you can see that it's trying to actually get those requests, and they will fail. Because if we look at the code for my service worker, I'm just saying, let's go to service. I got confused there for a second, sorry. First thing I'm doing with the service worker that you get in Ionic, they try to pre-cache the elements that you use. And this is what a standard pattern you'd want to use. You want to pre-cache, as soon as your service worker gets installed, you want to pre-cache the things like index.html. You'd always want to pre-cache that. Your fonts, those are the first things you want to cache. Your fonts, your polyfills, like the main stuff that your application will be built on. And then from there, you can then go ahead and like pre-cache routers and all the stuff like that. So this is, and you can name your cache, which particular cache, because you can have as many caches as you want. So ServiceWorker, this is caniuse.com. We're all familiar with this website, right? This is how we check it. So it's a standard. It's not like using current specific like stuff. It's a new standard. Like Chrome now supports it. Safari doesn't. You can do 20 years from like, sorry, not 20 years. You can go as long as you want to do this in Safari. It's not going to work. You can see that like on Safari. It's not. Microsoft are implementing. FireFox are working. Opera have actually done it. Nobody cares about Opera right now. But so when I said storage, it's not like using your local store, like the local storage API. No, it's not even using IndexedDB. It's a new storage. That's the cache is actually allowing you to use your system level storage. Like so if you have 20 megabytes, 20 gigabyte left in your hard disk on whatever device you're running, you have 20 gigabytes available to that service worker. And the service worker, each application registers its own service worker. This is the file. It's a JavaScript file, service worker. And what happens here is, if we go, so you can see all these, this is probably because it's using service worker toolbox, but the service worker is in your navigator. If you go to the index.html, you can see here, line 21 to 27, we actually register. So we're checking if your browser, service worker in navigator, if it's a feature in your browser, go ahead, register it. This is native code. So this will not run in Safari because service worker would not be in navigator, and your app would just be like a normal web app. So it's a new feature. It's not a feature that already exists. It's a new one, but Chrome has it. That's why I'm using Chrome. Going back to your question, if in the future today I go on facebook.com and there's a service worker installed, right? If I go to Safari and service worker has finally worked in Safari and I go to the same domain, facebook.com, it's not going to register a new service worker because remember, the service worker is system level per domain. It's just going to look into the system and say, a service worker for this domain has been installed, regardless of what browser is running, and will serve that. Because if we had to deal with different browsers, then there's no point. Like, then it wouldn't be a standard of the browser. Does that clarify to a great degree? Like, we can try it. I'm not sure that's going to work on my, like, I don't know what version of Firefox I have. I think I might have Firefox. Like, I don't know if I should even be trying this. But I don't know what version of Firefox. I might have like an older version, but actually let's try. Let's see if we went to, let's try to disable the internet. And we went to localhost 8100. So if it doesn't work, we're just gonna move on. This didn't happen, kind of thing. So let's see. Yeah, so it does bring, yeah, so I probably have a weird version, but you can actually see the app coming up. I don't know why the images aren't showing for some reason, but that's the whole point. Like, it's recognized as ServiceWorker, so I don't know what version of Firefox is probably really old. OK, so it's safe to say it's because of my old browser that the images aren't coming up. But the app actually launches. So this is the kind of behavior. This kind of extends to your question. This is the kind of behavior. I never opened this app on Firefox, but Firefox recognizes that this app has been cached, and then it would go ahead and, so this is the behavior we want to cross-browser, because it's getting the cache from the system, not browser per browser. Make sense? The images are not coming from Ionic server. They're still coming from the server. I don't know, like I said, this is like test. I'm using a very old version of Firefox. I don't even know why I have Firefox, but I don't really know why I have Firefox. But the whole point is, this is just a local server. So we're gonna go back to the slides now. So now we've actually solved our ServiceWorker issue. So we have our app working. The API is so powerful that people are so confused, and ServiceWorker Toolbox kind of makes it easy. It's sort of like how IndexedDB is. Does anybody use IndexedDB directly? Like, you're brave. I use PouchDB to interact with it because, like, it's just so complex. Let's be honest. Like, a lot of these things are very, very complex to use, like, because they're so powerful. If you don't know what you're doing, and half the time, a lot of it, like, I never know what I'm doing. So, like, this is the Mozilla docs that you can see. Like, ServiceWorker has an entire section. They tell you about cache, about push notifications. So yeah, I could write an entire talk about that. So yeah, feel free. Like, even just life cycle alone is huge. It has like 10 life cycles because it could be redundant. And I think now you can actually share service workers. I think they're trying to do something like that. Well, you can share service workers across like different domains if you want to get like some cookies from here. I don't know. Don't take my word for it. But anyways, we can say we've safely solved our service worker problem, right? So what's next? We want to solve desktop. We have a Linux. We got people using Linux, Mac, and Windows. How do we solve that? Desktop apps have a lot in common in terms of user experience with web applications, because when someone is on a desktop, you can kind of rule out. There's no Linux running on a mobile phone except if you try to hack it. Android is a kernel of Linux. That's a different story. But people that use desktop OSs are like running on fairly large devices. So they're very similar to the web. But there's still some notable differences. People there will be using keyboards, most likely, and mice only. It has to be offline. Like, imagine if you could not use like Dreamweaver or Visual Studio on like there has to be internet. Like, just go home if it's not working offline. OS X, Windows, and Linux are possible destinations. That's what we would normally consider. And so how do we ensure reuse between each desktop platform? We still want to write the same code, but across Linux, Mac, containers. We can use containers. And that's actually the same technique that the tool we're going to talk about actually talks about. So, and this is where we go with Electron. Electron is simply the Cordova for desktop. Like, that's just my definition. It's the Cordova for desktop, because when you want to share reuse, there are APIs. Each of them have different APIs. Windows understands an executable. I don't know what Mac understands. What does Linux understand? The tar files, target files? Yeah, it depends. So I really don't know, but that's the thing. Like, each of them have different APIs. You know, they use .NET. This one uses CocoaPods and all them things. And then Linux is just anybody can just come and like just create their own. And you gotta know, is it Ubuntu? Is it, you know, Kubuntu, Xubuntu? If they do, is that a thing still? So Electron has done all that overhead for you. These are some Electron apps that a lot of you use every day, but you don't realize. Atom is Electron. Atom was the first proper Electron project. Like, I think the Atom team kind of created Electron, right? So this is all HTML, CSS, JavaScript, which is crazy, right? Using HTML to write HTML. Slack, the one that runs on your desktop, is HTML. It's all built with the web.
It's not Electron now.
So have they moved? Oh, all right. So new information, they've moved, but they used to be. they've left the team. But Visual Studio Code certainly still. It's weird because they're still listed on the Electron website. So yeah, so these guys were built, but Visual Studio Code certainly, they're all built with HTML and have moved. And so now let's see how we can do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to go to Electron JS. So if you actually go to the Electron website, like I'm just going to pretend this is the first time I'm seeing Electron. And you can actually see apps that have been built to Electron. A lot of the apps you know and use, like, I don't know any of these ones. Shopify, that looks very familiar. But yeah, so let's just go to Electron and see how we can get started. So we get to get started. All we need to go is this particular place called, we just need to go here and clone this repo. I'm just going to save time and just like download the actual repo. Just download the zip file. And I'm just going to go show in Finder. And I'm going to move this to my desktop. I'm just going to move to my desktop. And I'm just going to go here. And where's that zip file? And I'm going to unzip that zip file. And we have Electron Quick Start Guide. So let me just read the instructions. It says, always read instructions. Clone the repository. Run npm install inside the directory. And npm start. So let's do that. So I'm just going to go to this guy. I'm going to open the terminal window. CD desktop. Oh, I'm in my desktop, idiot. No, I'm in my actual PDA app. So CD Electron Quick Start, right? We need to do npm install. Let's bring the whole house down. God damn, it's nice to work in Google. You got super fast internet. Pretty cool. Might want to live here. So we need to do npm start, right? That was the command, right? OK, let's do npm start and see what comes up. We have a desktop application working. Like, this is not a web app. This is a desktop application. We can see actually Electron, like we can actually run commands. If this was on Windows, this would come up like Windows. If it was on Linux, it would just come up like a Linux application. We can do all the things that we normally do, you know, those things, we can do all of that. We can do that. Like, it's just a normal, it's just like Chrome, basically. This is, we've made a, so let's actually see the Electron code. Let's see the Electron code. Let's see what that looks like. And it's actually pretty light. It has an index.html file, which is like where you say you like, it's your entry point, just like index of any page. And there's a main.js. And Electron uses Node, of course. And Electron allows you to do so many things. You can look that up. Multi-threading, there's 1,001 things it allows you to do. But this is what we're interested in. They have this thing called load URL, which allows you, just like in PhoneGap as well, you specify which page you want to load when the app starts. Right now, it's index.html, right? So what do you think we should do? We want to serve our Ionic applications index.html instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back. We're going to go to $billion application. We're going to go into the www folder. And inside that www folder, there is an index.html, right, which is the root of our application, which is what we've seen here. This is the index.html. So we just relatively walked down the 3. So let's actually end this. And let's start this again. And if we start this, we have a desktop application running with Ionic, with web, everything. And if we do this guy again, we keep doing this guy, this thing, all that works. Don't get confused again. I'm joking. But yeah, we're still writing one code. We still haven't said if else. We've just used the tools. This is really powerful because we can share code not just across this. And this would, if it's on Windows, it would just look like Windows, like have all the menus. All we're doing, we're not focusing on the quirks between platforms. We're just focusing on building what users are going to use. And I think that's what we should be doing. Why do you think we use frameworks today? Because nobody wants to write Bootstrap from scratch. There was a time if you wrote your own framework from scratch, you were considered cool, but now you're considered an idiot because you're not going to get anything done. Yeah, it was a time when developers wouldn't use jQuery. They would go, you know, document the query ID, and we thought it was cool. He's so smart, you know. But today we just look at you. It's the same way I tell my friends that use Vim. Like a time will come where if you use Vim, you're going to be looked at as an idiot. You will have to use an IDE of some sort. No offense to the Vim guys in the house. Productivity is what counts. I guess what I'm trying to say is, with everything I've said, is productivity is what really matters. And these are the tools. We've been able to, I've just come here. You've never met me. I'm not a magician. But I've come here. I've shown you a progressive web app. I've shown you 3 mobile platforms. I've run them on the emulator. I've shown you a desktop application running. And I've also shown you web applications that are responsive. And they all respond to each platform they're on. What we could do with Ionic is, if, for example, we wanted to support maybe Mac OS specific design, we could just tie that in. And if it's on a Mac OS, it just knows to use this particular CSS file and respond, and not have to think about so many things. And this is something they're actually already working on. Now imagine this running on a watch as well. If you just shrinks, it should show one. That's what we want. We want to be able to do things and be productive, not waste time on the ifs and the buts. So we're probably going to go back to the slides now. We can actually see all these applications running, of course. We can see that this is still running here. And I want to see the power of service workers running on an Electron app. I can't wait to see that. I really cannot wait to see something like that. Here, we have actually solved every single problem. Yes, the desktop application. So you'd probably just use some of the, that's an Electron specific thing. It's just a build process that you have. You just do that, and then you generate your package. So like how Cordova, you run some sort of command. Cordova just generates you an APK or an IPA file. If you read the Electron docs, they cover all of that. In reality, you'd have some sort of folder structure. I think I get what you're asking now. So if I'm working in a real team where we're sharing this code, well, of course, that would be just like every other code sharing application. I would have probably a folder for the main Ionic bit, which is what we're using at the core. Then I'll create top level folders. That would probably be up to your organization folder structure. My answer might not be your one, but it's similar to how Windows Universal. You have a project for Windows Phone. You have a sub project for Windows PC proper and everything. And so it's free for all. I don't think it can be enforced, because if you can just relatively walk any path, and at build time, the whole point of the path is it will just go and grab everything you need, bundle it up, and you're good to go. Everything you see here, you can just push on a server, because what you have, you're pushing to the server is a bundle. What Ionic does is the CLI is already bundled. Actually, when you're pushing, you have just 3 files, your index, you have the main.js, which is all the bundle file. Everything that you don't need is taken out. You have the main.css as well, and that's bundled. I think that's it. And then maybe a polyfill file, I think, just for the polyfills for Internet Explorer browser. We don't want anything to look boxy on Internet Explorer and that kind of thing. And that's pretty much it. So, which means when you launch, your app is just going to make 3 requests, and that's it. I think now, seeing that, I couldn't. I think this looks material design-ish, but you can. Ionic allows you to specify that. I don't know if I can actually remember the command. You can actually say you want this particular design no matter what. You can do that with Ionic. Ionic gives you this huge, it's just so easy as well. Let me actually just, I wouldn't demo it, but I'll show you. So with Ionic, you can go here and do something like this. First thing you can do is you can play around with the CSS. That would be in theme. You can come here and play around with the CSS and override any CSS specific thing. They give you all the list of everything. But you can also go to the app module. Where is that? Oh, somebody opened my node modules folder. Here we go. So you can actually come here with Ionic. You can give a space here, and you can pass in a specific object. And this object, you can go I think it's platforms. So you can do something like platform exactly. You can go on the platform level, but you can also go to, I think you can just do something like mode. And you can say iOS or something like that. So you can do it on a platform level. You can say, okay, iOS, do this, but you can just override everything and say, okay, you want it to be everything to use iOS only or material design. Or you can even create your own if you want. So that allows you this. Nothing is enforced. Everything is configurable. Does that make sense? Yes. And this is all documented in the Ionic documentation, which I will show. So if I actually show you the cache, if we go back and see that cache again, you will see performance application. Ionic cache. You can actually see all those things here, like polyfill, main.js, vendor.js. Of course, these ones are development times. Like a lot of this wouldn't be there in production. AOT would just take out, you probably have like, you're not gonna have like your map files, for example. Like all this is development time. But yeah, these are some of the things you wanna do. So, and I advise that when you're pre-caching, pre-cache the light things, index.html, critical CSS, of course, should always be inline in the index anyways. And then maybe your fonts, those are the things that, because the whole point of ServiceWorker is even if there isn't a network request, you want to show the user something. And the app shell, they have what we call the app shell design scheme. And you can show like the shell, like you saw how Safari rendered that clunky thing. It didn't show us the image, but at least it showed us a shell, like we knew something was happening. And if you have like some inline things like, oh, welcome to our app, like you could show the user something. Oh, you seem to be offline, that's why you're seeing this. Like, or show them a dinosaur if you want. Right now, we saw what happened with the new $1,000 phone that broke everybody's phone. And they've already gone ahead and released a patch. So you just upgrade, nothing gets blown away, that's it. So yeah, there'll always be changes, you'd have to react, but Ionic are way ahead of you because way before you know those changes are coming, they already do. They've just made a WK Web View default for all Ionic builds. So WK Web View is the version of, it's kind of Google's fault. So Google makes Chrome, and Chrome is, let's be honest, the best browser. But on your iPhone, there's something called a Nitrous engine, the JavaScript engine, which is super good, but they don't let you use that engine. And the kind of thing so that people that like Chrome don't come, get great performance, and then no one would use Safari, right? So it's that kind of thing. But now they launched the WK Web View that allows you to use the Nitrous engine in your applications, so faster JavaScript rendering and stuff like that. And Ionic's already made that default for all their apps, which means you get better performance as well. So we've solved our little problem here, and now we have all these applications, and we're still writing one code. That's the most important thing. Yes, I've shown you this with Ionic, but this doesn't stop you from using anything if you want. Like, the whole point is to show that this is what we want to do. The whole point with things like Cordova, I've been to the Cordova conference 3 years in a row. Every day, the first talk they give is, we don't want to be here. The reason why Cordova's APIs mirror the W3C spec is one day they want you to remove the Cordova plugin, but that code would work because it will be supported natively. And today you can do that with like geolocation. You can remove the geolocation plugin and just make one change. Like I think because they use window.cordova.navigator, if you just remove the .cordova, it should just be the navigator, and your code will work. We want the browser to be able to do this, and I'll talk about my predictions at the end. So yeah, like I really like the whole experience, and I think like everyone here was like really, getting involved. Like it felt like fire, like Dracarys, Don't say the Dracarys. Trust me, dragons are real. Other things to be aware of: Ionic Pro. I talked about that, and I said I was going to talk about. It's sort of like their stuff to make you sort of like if you're using enterprise stuff. If you want to, not just enterprise. If you want to build in the cloud, for example, if you have a Windows application, you can't build an iOS application, so you need to build that app in the cloud. They have something for that. Crash request. I didn't get to show you the Ionic crash, the error reporting. Pretty cool. It literally highlights you the line. Everything is cached now. Things like crash requests. If you have like a crash in real time, Ionic deploy is really cool. It allows you to update your app live without going through the app store. Like literally, because say it's Christmas, you wanna change your logo to like have a Santa hat. By the time you send that update to like Apple, it depends on how the guy feels. Like if he just doesn't like you, it's probably going to be winter, and then your users are going to get an update Easter, and they're going to get an update saying jingle bells, like what's going on here? So it allows you to hot reload your application, update your app. But not just that. Imagine beta testing. You have 3 new designs. You don't know which one people would like. So you choose a demographic. You send this design to these guys. And this is what Facebook, Twitter already do today. You send this design to these guys. And you see how they respond. You measure, and you say, oh, it seems like this age group like this age group, so this is what we're going for. You can do that because you can push hot updates. Or imagine fixes. Maybe that guy went to push the master on a Friday, and we know what happens when you push the master on a Friday. Exactly. So what do? On Saturday, you have to make a new fix, things like that. They have a Ionic, creator. Allows you to do drag and drop and prototype your app and just click one button, all the code is generated for you. So that way, if your UI designer now doesn't need to go to Photoshop first, they can just actually create stuff right there. If you like it, you click one code, you're not going to create the same thing again, you're just carrying on because the code has been generated for you. And a lot of things they're working on as well. There's something called Stencil JS that they just launched. So Ionic 4.0 is coming. Right now we have 3.0. And 4.0 promises to be platform agnostic. It's based on web components. So you can use it with Vue, you can use it whatever, you can use it like jQuery by itself. And Stencil JS is something they launched that allows you, every one of you, to create your own web components, which is pretty cool. So that's something that's coming soon. So these are my predictions. I think in the next year, progressive web apps will be allowed to enter the app stores. And I think that would start from the Google App Store. I have a feeling that you can submit your progressive web app to the App Store in the next year. That will start with Google. That's my prediction. I could be wrong. The concept of desktop application as we know them will deprecate. This is my prediction. In the next few, say 5, 10 years, what you know as a desktop application will deprecate. Why? And I think another thing is the end of frameworks. Instead of, oh, what do you use? React, Angular, I hate you, you hate me too, let's fight. No, we're just not gonna stop frameworks. Like the web is gonna get so cool that we're not really gonna be worrying about frameworks. We're just gonna be building cool stuff. Progressive web apps will make it to your Mac, Linux, and Windows computer. That's my prediction. One day you're gonna go to www.photoshop.com, you're gonna say save, and an icon will appear on your desktop, and you can use that app. It will happen. This is just my prediction. We've seen how WebAssembly has come now. So we're gonna start playing FIFA online. That would be pretty cool, because WebAssembly is giving you assembly level performance or access via JavaScript. That's happening. All these new standards are coming. These are my predictions. And the web, as we know it today, will be the new native. So when we say native, a time will come when we say native, we're talking about the web, because the concept of native will go away. These are my very bold predictions. 10 years from now, you could be like, that idiot guy came and told us all this and nothing came to pass. But these are my predictions, because I feel that's the world we want to live in. We want to be able to just write code and not have to worry about bureaucracy, and just really just give people cool stuff. Today, when you write your website, you code it, you just maybe worry about Internet Explorer for like a little bit, but you're not worrying that people are going to see anything different. They're going to get the same behavior. Why can't we have that everywhere? Why? Remember when I started with Spotify, moving between platforms, it's the experience that moves. Let us build for experiences, and let's not have to worry about ifs and buts, because that would really be a cool time to live. So shameless promotion by myself. I just launched this new project called UI.School. If you happen to Angular and you want to learn Angular, it's like an online course that we're launching pretty soon. It's a 4-week program. We're going to teach you how to go from wireframe up till production code. Because a lot of people go learn these courses, maybe learn about Angular, but when you get a job, you still can't, you can't still ship a project. We just want to tell you, hey, this is what you need to do to ship a project from A to Z. And there is right now, you can just sign up to the mailing list and we'll be mailing you. But if you sign up today, you have you get to, when the course comes out, you get a special discount. I've made sure of that. It's a 4-week bootcamp, online, everything. We never have to see you, never have to see us. And it's that's what we're doing. You go online to see the curriculum and everything. So you can start by going to the Ionic site, ionicframework.com. They have an awesome documentation. These guys know how to make a documentation. The only documentation I can think that is as good online is the RxJS website that has that wizard that allows you to know what operator you want to use. That's pretty cool. Electron JS, you can get it there. My blog, I don't really write stuff. The only thing keeping my blog alive is I wrote a documentation about the Ionic page lifecycle. And I think I'm probably one of the few people on the internet that wrote it. That's the only reason people come there. But I tweet a lot as well. You can follow me everywhere at Sani Yusuf. That username is my username. If you see anyone using that username and it's not me, let me know. Josh Maroney is a legend. It's a guy from Australia that blogs about everything Ionic. He's got great courses, great books. I always promote Josh. He's pretty cool. And that's it. I'll take any questions now. Just the web as it is. Something probably, we are human beings, right? We like to be binary. But I feel like the way today now, to the degree that you want to there were, like, for example, there was a time where you'd ask people, do you know JavaScript? They would say yes, but they didn't know that they didn't know JavaScript. They actually knew jQuery. But they had no idea that they didn't know JavaScript. This is a real thing. You'd ask people, do you know JavaScript? They'd be like, yes, of course. All right, what is an IFI? And they'd be like, what is that? They didn't know that. So that's because we got so abstracted that we lost our purpose. We were busy worrying about what are you using. This is what we ask ourselves today. What do you guys use? Like, I know you're a web developer. You know I'm a web developer. But I'm asking you, what do you use? Like, it's just crazy. It's like, oh, what do you eat? Like, food, of course. You know, I'm not sure about who am I to say what's gonna replace that? But I think the web as it is will start delivering on its promises, and we would really need to do things. And we've seen people building fully fledged applications on just the web. You know, if you look at the specs, a lot of the things you use in Angular today, they're actually in ES7, ES8 specs. Observables are being discussed. Component decorators are being discussed. If decorators are the reason you're using Angular, when decorators are supported in the browser, why would you use Angular? That's the question. If web components become a standard, why would you be using Angular or React or whatever? There's no need anymore because that's going to give you, that's what Stencil is doing, is going to give you performance that these guys can't give you because they have to hack it. So that would deprecate. I think the web will deliver. It'll take a while if we need to use experience. Hope that answers your question. Questions? Yes, sir? We never use AngularJS. Angular. So when we say AngularJS, we don't want to say Angular 1, because if I do that, Igor is going to hear this and he's not going to like it. You're not allowed to say Angular 1. But yeah, with Angular, the thing is, that's a question I get a lot of time. How long is it going to take? It's never learning. It's like maths. If you leave it, it leaves you. It's totally up to you, but you're always learning. I teach Angular all the time. And just by going to the class, sometimes I'm the lead instructor. Sometimes I'm a side instructor. I'm just helping out students. And every single class I go, I learn something new. Some student would ask me a question. And I'll be like, ooh, you know what? I'll just make up some story about how we make sure we forget the question. I'm like, oof, that's interesting. How do we solve that? Today, I was telling them about how ServiceWorker will cross domains, like browsers and everything, right? That's what I read. But the funny thing is, I had actually never tested that. I just believed what I read. But today we tested and we proved it here. And I learned that. And I'm like, oh, cool. It's things like that. If he hadn't asked that question, we probably wouldn't have proven that. And that's the thing. So it's totally up to you. And another question to just add to that, you can never know something. The day you say, I know this completely, that's the day you're just saying, I'm a rookie. You can never know something like to that degree. I've just launched a school where we're saying, well, ours is a bit different because we're not starting from beginners, right? But yes, what is a professional application? That's another question. So if I build Craigslist is a professional application, I can build that in a day. Craigslist is a professional application. It makes a lot of millions of dollars. So again, it's one of those open-ended questions. If I give you an answer, I will only be giving you my opinion, but I wouldn't be giving you the answer. So that's why I can't fully. I can just tell you, all depends. But we live in a practical world. If you want to train people to learn how to use Angular properly, I would say let's pretend they know JavaScript, right? Let's pretend they know JavaScript to a good degree, HTML5, CSS, pretty standard. I've just come from a class where I taught people in 3 days, and they got it. And I've been doing that for a while, 3 days. I just give you the basics of Angular, and the rest is just what you learn on the go, and Stack Overflow, of course. So, yeah, I hope that helps. OK, 12 weeks. Maybe. Questions? Yes, I do. I play football with Sebastian every Wednesday. Sebastian, if you're watching this, yes. I'm guessing you want to say, is it better than Ionic? OK, NativeScript will give you a native application, and you're going to use Angular 2. And it would give you some sort of reusability. It's pretty great, right? It's absolutely awesome. There's going to be a but. It's absolutely awesome. It will give you a native app, but NativeScript was not the first to take that path. Do you know how NativeScript works? It's a JavaScript V8 engine running in runtime that your JavaScript gets translated to native. So it's not compiled like Xamarin. And they're not the first. Accelerator, a lot of people have taken that path. My personal opinion is, as long as you're moving away from the web, you have a short lifespan. As long as you're not betting on the web, a time will come where people would not want to use you because your promise would be delivered by the web. And we're seeing that. The case for native apps getting smaller and smaller by the day. People are building everything on the web. Progressive web apps are coming. That's just my opinion. It's a great tool. Don't get me wrong. Absolutely awesome. Like, I love it. I was one of the first people to write stuff about it. And I'm still involved in that community. I actually co-organized the London NativeScript community. But trust me, my honest opinion, if you're not betting on the web, sooner or later, there will not be a case for you. It might be 10 years, it might be 20. Who knows? My honest opinion. But it's a great tool. You should definitely look to try it. It's absolutely awesome. That's a question that will always be asked about performance. And I think the thing is, when we talk about performance, we talk about it as if we have a very clear, like this is performance. Like you can touch it, you can feel it. Like this is performance, right? Trust me, Craigslist is not. It's a performance site, but it's an absolutely ugly site. But people still use it. You know, there are a lot of beautiful sites, very performant, but people don't use it. First thing I say is, if you're building anything in the world and it's slow, as developers, our first intuition is to blame the technology. You're doing something wrong. You've either chosen the wrong approach to go from day one, or you're doing something wrong. I'm not going to stand here and say you can build everything with Ionic and life will be cool. The same way I'm not going to stand here and say you can build everything with native, or you should build everything with native. If I'm creating Angry Birds, I'm never going to even approach Ionic, because why? The web is not there yet. And map-based applications, you could say that, but you know, a lot of people have built, map-based applications that are cool. To what degree are you willing to really work for performance? Yes, when you're going native, you don't have to do a lot of work because that's already been done for you. But every web application you're building today, you'd have to do a lot of, think about how you're writing CSS and everything. You really need to think. And there are some apps, yes, if you're building high intensity gaming type of hardware acceleration type of things, you probably shouldn't use the web today. No, not today. But how many of those apps are our apps? WhatsApp is a $1 billion application. What does it do? List, click, tell someone you love them, that's it. That's it. What does Uber do? See when you get your taxi, most of our applications are pretty trivial. That's my point. Yeah, and the web is catching up with that. Today you can do AR, VR, WebAssembly. I think WebAssembly is a big thing. When WebAssembly is done, the whole point of performance, that talk just goes out of the window. That's it, because if I'm writing JavaScript, I'm talking to the metal, well, how much faster can you get? And so it's trade-offs. No, let your requirements of your application decide. Don't go saying, we're gonna use Ionic, and we're gonna build a game. No, okay, we're trying to build a game. We needed to do this. We didn't. Does Ionic do this? Okay, let's probably do this. Let your requirements decide. So that's it. Okay, guys. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.